Hello, community. I am here today to do another office hours, or just, a presentation on polydiaphragmatic breathing. Now, I did one last week, but I decided not to post it to the community chat yet because I didn't really feel like it fit in with this month's theme of sleep. It was that class was an introduction to the basic concepts and how to access the hydraulic system innate within our fascial planes using a polydiaphragmatic breath. Because I wanted to, in the subsequent office hours, unpack that by looking at a number of exercises, some that we've done here in the community, but others that are just sort of basic touch your toes kind of things. And even to look at different things that might cause you problem or pain. Maybe you need to pick up your toddler grandchild and want to reduce wear and tear. You don't want to throw out your back every other week doing so, or maybe you have a shoulder problem and you have to reach up for something on a regular basis and you want to figure out how to use the hydraulic system to do that in a way that won't cause you pain. So like I said, I wanted to be able to follow up that class with other classes that fit in, that built on that theme. So I decided to hold off, and instead this week I am going ahead and making a video that I think fits in way better with the current theme, which again is sleep. And so just a little recap. If you watched my polydiaphragmatic breathing class that we did here, or you saw a version of it on the YouTube, you know that we are allowing the breath to roll. We're trying to get complete recruitment of the thoracic diaphragm, most of which is on the back half of the body. And the best way to get full recruitment of that back half of the diaphragm is to actually start on the back, and in fact to start at L4 and allow the breath to roll up the front of the lumbar spine, around the bottom of the rib cage like a wave at the edge of the ocean split by a boulder, allowing those waves, which are in phase with each other, to crash into each other underneath the sternum, lifting the sternum from below, effortlessly extending the inhalation. Simultaneously, the contraction coming up from L4 recruits the lower esophageal sphincter right from the very moment the breath launches off of L4, closing off the opening of the stomach and simultaneously inducing a pulse wave into the esophagus that comes up the esophagus through the throat or the pharynx and then into the mouth. And that can, when you have your little suction seal where your tongue is on the roof of the mouth and your suction seal is in place, and that recruits the tongue and it pulls the tongue back and down, and that, because it's suction to the roof of the mouth, pulls the roof of the mouth back and down with it, which is very similar to, I believe, oh goodness, the gentleman who did one of the first mechanics courses. Remember, he talked about trying to pull the floor of the mouth, floor of the nasal cavity, roof of the mouth backwards so that you widen your airway. That will be done for you. And I forgot, sorry, I don't remember his name. That will be done for you if you have a suction seal in place, if you recruit the diaphragm from L4, because L4, the fibers make up your lower esophageal sphincter, and they will pull the esophagus back and down, and that will pull the tongue back and down. And if your tongue is suctioned to the roof of the mouth, which is the floor of the nasal cavity, it will draw those things posterior, making your airway a little larger. I think his name was Tom. I might be wrong about that, so I shouldn't even try to guess there. And then so then if we allow that same pulling sensation to mobilize the floor of the mouth as well, that will create a flux in the floor of the mouth. the tongue and the roof of the nasal cavity, bringing the breath up the back of the shoulders, neck, and head. Bringing breath into the head, turning on another set, two pumps in the head to move air and fluid in the body. Allowing it to recruit the lower jaw creates a flux in this diaphragm here that gives you an expanded sense of breath in the head, making it feel that your breath is expanding from the very center of the head outward with each inhalation. And we also allowed it to recruit the roof of the nasal cavity, allowing the breath to pull the roof of the nasal cavity down just a little bit. These are little shifts. These are tiny shifts. They are about 1 millimeter of motion, but allowing that inhalation to draw the roof of the nasal cavity down, and that bringing a breath that comes up the midline of the body, and especially expanding, giving you a sense of expansion, pushing the two hemispheres of the brain away from each other with inhalation. And it's the strongest, that midline sensation is the strongest between the hemispheres, but remember, it actually, we could feel it all the way down to the floor of the pelvis. And that's because, oh shoot, I wanted to pull up a picture of that. I'll pull up a picture of that too. Wanted to, because, and that's because your dura, which is a non-distant, it's the hard case around the central nervous system, for those of you who are not familiar with it. It's like the hard, non-distensible plastic in a guitar case. And because it's non-distensible, if you move one part of it, you're going to move wherever else it's attached. Now, your dura is attached to the roof of the nasal cavity at the cribriform plate, and it's also goes around the whole brain and around the spinal cord. It also goes all the way down and attaches to your sacrum coccyx. So when you allow the roof of the nasal cavity to move, you can actually feel a little twinge of sensation that goes all the way down to the floor of your pelvis. That means that when you empty from the top to the bottom, all the way down through your body, and remember, when you empty, it really helps. When you want to relax and exhale, it really helps to relax your head, your scalp, your face, your neck. And that will help that breath come out softer and easier. As we relax and let that emptiness go all the way down through the body, when it gets, when it gets all the way down to the floor of the pelvis, remember the pelvic diaphragm, when that sense of emptiness gets all the way down to the floor of the pelvis, it will lift the floor of the pelvis, giving you a slight spontaneous, here, I'll do it this way. It will lift the floor of the pelvis for you, giving you a slight spontaneous, effortless little kegel or mula band. And that little mula band, once it fully forms, will then drop. Actually, it will often drop even before it fully forms, but just understand that when it lifts at the end of exhalation, it can be the last thing to create positive pressure in your chest, because it's going to lift up your internal organs, which push into your thoracic diaphragm, making the chest a little smaller, right? And once that pelvic floor lifts, right, making the chest a little smaller, after it lifts, it's going to, and a little smaller means a little more exhalation, a little more air and fluid motion. And when it drops, it's going to pull down on your internal organs, which pull down on your thoracic diaphragm. And that starts to make your chest cavity get bigger. That means that increased volume is going to create decreased pressure or vacuum pressure in the chest, and that's going to draw the air in. That is an answer to a question. I forget who asked me that question, but somebody asked, what's the significance of the movement of the pelvic floor? I'll repeat that. When you empty and you allow that emptiness to come all the way down through your body as the thoracic diaphragm relaxes, and you allow your head to relax and your neck to relax and your chest and abdomen and pelvis, when it gets all the way to the floor of the pelvis, it will lift the floor of the pelvis for you, right? You may have to practice a little bit doing this a little bit. You may have to do some mula bands, because sometimes if you're very congested down here, it might be stiff and it might be slow to get it moving, but it will start moving eventually. If you're having a problem with that, please feel free to send me a message and I will, maybe we could meet on Zoom or something and talk about it live. So The pelvic floor lifts at the end of exhalation. When it lifts, it's going to push up your internal organs, which are going to push further into your thoracic diaphragm, making your chest get a little smaller. That's going to, if there's any air that can leave still, it will leave, but it's probably mostly going to be continuing to move fluid at that point, right? And then once it's lifted, it's going to drop, right? And when it drops, it's going to pull down on your thoracic diaphragm. I'm sorry, it's going to pull down on your internal organs, and that will pull down on your thoracic diaphragm, and that helps begin the process of generating vacuum pressure in the chest. So the significance of the pelvic floor moving at the end of exhalation, the beginning of inhalation, is that it is a very large, powerful diaphragmatic pump that could be participating in moving air and fluid in your body, and participating in all of the other things that diaphragms can do for us, which we will continue to muse about for weeks on end. But when this happens, when this pelvic floor drops to begin your inhalation, the first thing that will happen is the pelvis fills with pressure, because it's going to draw fluid from the legs into the abdomen as it drops, and it's going to pull this fluid into the abdomen as well. And so your pelvis is going to fill with pressure. And when the pelvis fills with pressure, it's going to tip the sacrum backwards. And when it tips the sacrum backwards, when you get this tipping motion where the base of the sacrum, it's kind of counterintuitive the way they name it. Looking at my skeleton over there, that base of the sacrum, when that tips backwards, right, it pulls what they call the apex, even though, let me do it this way. It pulls the apex forward. So what happens when when the pelvic floor drops with inhalation is the sacrum tips like this. And when it tips like that, it induces a wave at L4, and that wave rolls up the front of it induces a wave through S5, L1, and then into L4, and that rolls up the front of the spine and round the bottom of the rib cage, and doing all the other things. So we covered that in the first class, and we also learned how to use recruitment of our arms and legs with inhalation and relaxation with exhalation in order to use the diaphragms, the 3 diaphragms we have in each extremity. 6 in the lower extremities, 6 in the upper extremities. I should say 6 that I know of. There might be more than that, and you might find them, and you should tell me about them when you do. So we also learned that in the first class, and we also learned how to, that if we engage the arm and the leg on one side, it made one side of the body get longer and fatter and pulled more air through one nostril. And when we exhale, everything retracted. And then when we inhaled on the other side, we could fill up the other side with more pressure. And we could dictate reproducibly and consciously dictate which side of which nasal passage we drew the air through. And so that's a summary of the first class. And then I believe it was the second and third office hours, we did guided meditations that introduced us to to more diaphragms in the head. We learned about the cheeks being a sheet of muscle, skin, and fascia attached to the maxilla zygoma and the mandible that hug your teeth when they inhale and release your teeth when you exhale, if you let them, and when you do, it brings more fluid circulation. We learned about these little nose flaps here, and that when we allowed these to hug the midline with inhalation and release the midline with exhalation, it felt like we could breathe through the footprint of the nose, making it feel, when we used all 4 of these diaphragms, making it feel like we could breathe right through our whole lower face, even though the air is only passing through our nostrils. And we learned that we could allow the eardrums to hug the midline when we inhaled and release the midline when we exhaled, making it feel like we could breathe through the ear holes, inducing fluid motion in this whole temporal region of the brain. We learned how we could allow the area we call the temples, temporalis muscle, in the temporalis fossa. We can allow those to hug the midline a little bit, little tiny bit of motion with inhalation, releasing the midline with exhalation. And we learned we could cool off the frontal lobes, taking a breath into the using the temporalis, or using the temples to breathe. And then we also learned that if we relaxed let our eyelids be soft and relaxed, they would hug our eyeballs with inhalation, releasing our eyeballs with exhalation. We learned that the eyeball itself is a diaphragm. It is very similar to the central tendon with the heart sticking on top of it, right? The eyeball is tethered by a much more scant muscular network than the thoracic diaphragm, but a muscular network nonetheless, that is tethering the eyeball like the central tendon into the eyeball. And when we inhale, if we let our eyes feel soft and relaxed, we will feel our eyes drawn toward the back of our head by our inhalation, and we will feel them puffing, drifting back forward with exhalation. And if we allow this little motion to happen in our eyeballs, we will feel a plane of cooling sensation that follows the distribution of the optic tract right toward the back of the brain to the occiput. All of this is just anatomy, anatomy, anatomy. The eyelids will actually, the movement of the eyelids actually make your whole orbit cool off. We actually learned in those office hours that, in fact, the cornea, the iris, and the lens of the eye are like a triple decker of diaphragms, so that the front of the eyeball even pulls in a little bit if you let it with inhalation and puffs back forward. This, I'm sure, is going to be something very helpful to anybody with glaucoma, which is a result of excess pressure building up and not being able to escape adequately through the the canal of Schlemm, right? Because so much pressure gets trapped back there because we're not allowing the wave of contraction to fully permeate the tissues and mobilize the front of the eyeball, which should be pumping that fluid out of the back of the eyeball. So we got all of these things, and now, and like I said last week, I thought, oh, I'm going to start to talk about the hydraulic system. But we're talking about sleep this month. So today I'm going to make a video that is more in alignment with this month's theme, which is sleep. And I'm also going to take a little moment at the beginning to address a comment that was in the chat with regard to the Joe Dispenza work. Because today we're going to talk about pineal gland stimulation. We're going to talk about using our diaphragms. Let me turn this guy off. We're going to talk about using our diaphragms to aim vectors at the pineal gland. And diaphragms, like we talked about, we've discussed, the many diaphragms in the external environment, which display their very wonderful capacities, possess those capacities or display those capacities as a result of the amount of tension in the sheet and the shape and the rigidity of the frame. So, for example, a drum head has a lot of tension in the sheet. So does the sheathing that we put on a building, those plywood sheets that make it integrated and taut. However, a spider web has very little tension, and you see their properties are all very different. Surface tension on body of water has very low tension in the sheet, and so it ripples very easily. And another thing that diaphragms can do, like a tennis racket, for example, we can use that diaphragm to generate a vector, a line of force. And I actually have a little video here. Hold on, let me see. Maybe, I have a little video here that will demonstrate that for us. Hold on. Wait, let me gotta pull that up. Here we go. I have, oh, sorry. I have a little video here. It's going to show you generating, share. Show you what you're gonna see in this video. We're back with the kids playing with the parachute. You're gonna, they've put like a object in here on top. I think it's like a rubber chicken. And what you're gonna see is that if they all work together, they
Up,
can
down.
shoot that thing
Whoa.
off.
Not
See?
bad, not bad. We got them about
It's a
halfway
rubber
up. We got
chicken.
about halfway up. Last one.
Are they gonna do it again?
Up, down. There he goes, there he goes, there he goes.
So you can see
Yes.
how they were
Right down
able
there.
to, shoot that object. That diaphragm had the capacity to generate a vector that shot that chicken off in a particular direction. Well, this is the capacity that we're going to take advantage of in order to create, to stimulate our pineal gland using the diaphragms in our body. Primarily the head, but really every diaphragm in the body can be aimed at the pineal gland. I think that when we have good diaphragmatic integration, my intuition is that when we really have good diaphragmatic integration, that's what happens. We end up aiming that when we have good diaphragmatic integration, it's when they are all aimed coherently at the pineal gland. And there's a bunch of other things that are going to flow from this that I think you're going to find quite fun. Now, a little segue over to the chat comment about the Joe Dispenza work. Now, I've read 2 of his books, and I've done his practices, and I've also been to 1 retreat. I didn't go too deeply in it, honestly. And I came to it with a lot of sort of technical background, having done a lot of yoga and martial arts in my life in the past. So I did have a good understanding of bandhas and how to use them to generate intrathecal pressure. And honestly, when I did those retreats, I actually had a pretty relatively well-developed breathing apparatus. Like I've said before, I believe I'm only scratching the surface of what's possible. So who knows, 10 years from now, we'll all look back and go, well, that is a pretty underdeveloped breathing apparatus she's talking about in those videos. But relatively speaking, a pretty well-developed relative to, let's say, me 15 years ago. Or 10 years ago, maybe even less. All right, so and let me say about the Joe Dispenza work, make a comment about that. A lot of what he is wanting people to do is to generate mechanical stress on the pineal gland, or pineal, or I'm not sure exactly how it's supposed to be pronounced, but he references a research, a paper where they discuss the pineal gland as a neuroendocrine gland with calcium oxalate crystals that have piezoelectric properties. Now, Joe Dispenza, and you know, I'm actually doing a lot more research on this myself in terms of the scientific literature, because I don't know if everything he says is true. But you know, he makes a compelling argument, and so I'm going to try to summarize that and understand this is my summary. Is that the pineal gland is this little gland that sits kind of in the center of your head, like if you put a little shish kebab through the front here and through the side here, right? And I'll show you some other pictures of it that will help you see where it is in your own brain better. But if you put shish kebabs here, the place where these 2 shish kebabs would intersect is where your pineal gland is. And a pineal gland is very small, and I guess it looks like a pine cone, and has these little hair-like projections called cilia on it, and as they get stimulated by the flow of cerebrospinal fluid around them, swishing around them, the claim is that they that a couple of things happen. From the stimulation of the cilia is that they will start to produce a number of different metabolites of melatonin. You know, and what we definitely, what's sort of the most basic understanding of the pineal gland is that it participates in regulating your circadian rhythm. So it has a very important autonomic function. That said, and I've been trying to verify these claims made in Joe Dispenza's work. And maybe if some of you have verified these claims, if you want to have that discussion with me, I'd love to have that discussion. But as you stimulate the pineal gland and stimulate these little cilia, what happens is the pineal gland starts producing, it becomes excited, you know, and that excitation causes a chain of metabolization of melatonin into a number of different substances, and some of those substances include an endogenous benzodiazepine. So for you anxiety people out there, this is a big deal. Your body, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was true. I mean, you know, we make our own adrenaline. I would not be surprised if we make an endogenous benzo as well. It's just I haven't verified this outside of his work, so I'm not really sure. But I'm getting to it, and when I get to it, I will tell you if I'm actually able to pin that down. It's an endogenous benzo, and is and that's like Valium or Klonopin or Xanax. Those are all benzodiazepines. Well, your pineal gland, according to Joe Dispenza and possibly verifiable, actually produces an endogenous benzodiazepine when you stimulate it, and create a flurry of motion in the cilia around the pineal gland. It produces some other things that it makes are some of the strongest anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, antiviral, anti-cancer substances known to man. That's another claim. Another claim is that another metabolite of melatonin is the same thing that causes electric eels to glow in the dark. And another metabolite, this is just what I'm remembering from the book. Another claim is that it actually will produce DMT. And so the stimulation of the pineal gland is said by some to release DMT, and that resulting in spiritual experiences or like experiences of other realms, you know, like you see things that aren't there, and etc. And like I said, you know, is all of this verifiable scientifically? We'll have to some of you out there might dive right into this. I haven't really had time to try to track all this down myself. But that's one claim of the Joe Dispenza work, is that by generating this pulsating intrathecal pressure through this process of squeezing the different, you know, your pelvic floor and compressing everything and forcefully inhaling and yanking all this pressure up to the top of your head and holding your breath and pressing really hard, you will get an increase of these metabolites in your body, which can have beneficial effects to you physically, mentally, spiritually. And another thing that is within the pineal gland, and I did look up this paper, that the pineal gland actually contains calcium oxalate crystals that have piezoelectric properties. And what does that mean, piezoelectric? I think piezoelectric means to press. to press, I think that's what it means. It's like a Greek word or something, but when you press on these, when you compress these crystals, they will start to generate an electromagnetic field around the body, like a toroidal field around, they will generate a toroidal field. So the more you compress them, the stronger you will make this field, is the thinking. Now, like I said, I've been to a Joe Dispenza retreat, and I do feel like I do feel like I benefited from it. And I feel like I feel like I got a lot out of it. I don't really like to talk about that kind of personal experience that much. But you know, this was I'm partly saying this to address that question that somebody had in the chat about Joe Dispenza, but also to talk a little bit about the thinking that not just Joe Dispenza, but a lot of people have around the pineal gland, and why it's called the I think they call it the God particle or something like that, in the center of your head. Now, that said, you know, even if all we're doing is improving the fluid motion in that area to remove calcifications from the pineal gland, to improve our circadian rhythm alone, I believe that there is tremendous benefit to stimulating the pineal gland. And what I want to say about, and we can do that using our polydiaphragmatic breath. And we don't have to do it in such a way that is so effortful and forceful. We can do it in a way that is very soft and gentle. And so let's now take a look at the anatomy here. Let's take a look at the anatomy. So we are going to, I again grabbed a couple of images from, here we go. And we'll start with this one. I really like this view of the pineal gland. That shows you that it is about the level of your eyebrow center, and it is just above your ear and just posterior to where the little ear hole is here, your external auditory meatus. So this is the side view. The pineal gland is not on the outside of your brain, though, it's in the center. And then we'll show you, this is the pineal gland from an anterior view. And this is nice because you see that there's these two hemispheres of the brain here. One here, one here. This is your cerebral cortex on each side. These little walnuts back here, the little walnuts, that's your cerebellum. And your pineal gland sits right in there. It kind of sits like at the bottom of this, or in the, and you see there's this little arroyo. Remember when I have said that remember we said that allowing the roof of your nasal cavity to move with your inhalation and exhalation generates pressure that feels like these two hemispheres are being pushed off to the sides with pressure. And then when you exhale, they kind of reapproach each other. So, so that's just so that you can locate the pineal gland for yourself. So here's the eye here and the eye here. This is the level of the roof of the nasal cavity, and this is the eyebrow center. Okay, moving on. This, I just wanted to pull this up. This is Gil Headley, if some of you want to get more familiar with the pineal gland. He does this really nice little pineal gland and pituitary introspective thing, and you might enjoy that. And then moving along, I just want to also show you, and we don't need to go too far here, but I'm gonna show you. This is the central canal. So your pineal gland is up here. It's up here, and the central canal kind of flows right into it. I did want to show you a picture of the dura as well. Dura. Let me get you a picture of the dura here. So the dura is the hard case, like we said, around the outside of the brain. And one of the places to which it's tethered is, it's tethered to the front of the roof of the nasal cavity. So it comes through here and it's tethered. Let's see if this is a good one. It's tethered, oh, it's inside, it's beyond, it's right at the bottom here. But it's actually tethered in a number of places, in your head. But what I want to point out about it, I was hoping they would have a view that takes you all, what you can see is that it actually, this dura on the outside actually goes around the whole spinal cord and comes out and attaches to your sacrum coccyx through a thing called your filium terminal, but we don't have to go into that too deeply right now. So let's just start with that. So now we're going to do a guided meditation, where we're going to see how easy it is to aim all of your diaphragms at the pineal gland. So in order to do this meditation, I think that it is best when you're first starting to do this lying on your back so you can be as relaxed as possible. Lying on your back with your knees up over a bolster, so that your low back can be comfortably flat on the floor, so you can eliminate all of that tendency towards hyperextension. If you need a little something underneath your head to allow your low back to lay flat on the floor, go ahead and do that. Like maybe like a, something just like a towel folded or something like that, or a towel rolled up underneath your neck. And let's start breathing from the bottom of the pelvis up to the top of the chest, and emptying from the top of the chest down to the bottom of the pelvis. And as you empty all the way down to the bottom of the pelvis, notice that if you allow your pelvic floor to be very soft and relaxed, at the end of your exhalation, you will feel a slight lift in the floor of the pelvis, a slight little mula bandh or kegel. And what I also want you to notice is that, and remember, the roof of your nasal cavity has a direct and non-distensible relationship with the floor of the pelvis. So when that pelvic floor drops as you start to inhale, I want you to allow your roof of your nasal cavity to be very soft and relaxed. It may help you when you do this to put some like really nice essential oil droplet, even just a little eucalyptus, but if you have something you really love, put it right underneath your nose. And that will help you to allow the roof of the nasal cavity to be very soft and relaxed, so that when you inhale, it will be drawn down by your inhalation. And when you exhale, it will float back up. And when you allow this little motion to happen in the roof of the nasal cavity, you will feel the midline sensation. It will be very strong between the two hemispheres of the brain. But I want you to see if you can feel it go all the way down to the floor of your pelvis. So when your pelvic floor drops at the beginning of inhalation, allow it to recruit the roof of your nasal cavity right from the very moment you start to inhale. And this will give a certain kind of directionality to that midline sensation. What I think you'll notice is that it feels like a bolus of pressurized energy rises up right through the middle of the body, right through the spine itself, and comes right up and out the top of the head and floods this, and at the same time floods the space in between the hemispheres, like water rushing down an arroyo. And you may even, if you keep inhaling long enough, you may even be able to feel it cutting underneath the brain back towards the center of the head. But the main thing I want you to notice is when you inhale and you feel that bolus of pressurized energy coming up the center of your head, I want you to note that it is going to pass right through. It's going to pass around the pineal gland like white water rushing around a boulder. Take a moment to go in there and find your pineal gland. Remember, it's eyebrow center and just behind the ear hole line and above the ear. Locate that spot in the center of your head, and as you inhale, allowing the roof of the nasal cavity to be recruited by the floor of the pelvis dropping. You will feel that bolus of pressurized energy rise up, and it rushes around the pineal gland, stimulating it, causing it to become more distinct from the surrounding tissue. That area in your head already feels distinct. Even before you start to do anything, if you just bring your mind there to where the pineal gland is, where you know it is, in the center of your head, like, oh, that place seems to have its own distinguished spot. And when you allow the roof of the nasal cavity to be recruited by the dropping of the pelvic floor, you can feel the bolus of pressurized energy rise up and rush around the pineal gland, stimulating it, making it, might even make it flicker a little bit in your awareness, like a little spark. And now let's bring your awareness to the tongue and the roof of the mouth. You're still allowing the roof of the nasal cavity to participate. Every time we add a diaphragm, you're going to keep, we're just adding. We're just adding vectors, right? So our initial vector is coming up the center of the spine, rushing around the pineal gland and in between the hemispheres. But now we're going to allow that little pulling sensation at the front of the throat and under the chin to recruit the roof of the tongue and the roof of the mouth. We're going to allow the tongue to be drawn back and down by that pulling sensation and allow it to draw the palate with it. And when you allow this little motion to happen in the tongue and the roof of the mouth, you will feel a plane, like a flat plane of sensation rising up the back of the shoulders, neck, and head. And that plane actually also contains the pineal gland. Now we have two breath fields. We're stacking breath fields on the pineal gland. And now on your next inhalation, I want you to bring your awareness to the lower jaw and allow the lower jaw to be recruited by that same pulling sensation. And when it shifts back and downwards, you will feel a flux in the floor of your mouth that gives you an expanded sense of breath in the head. To my best sense so far, it feels to me as if this breath emanates from within the pineal gland, which is just above the roof of your mouth, really, in many ways, or the back of your throat there. And that expansion happens from within the pineal gland, stimulating it from the inside out. Causing it to become increasingly distinct from the surrounding tissue, brighter and more distinct, cooler in temperature in the very center of your head. And now let's bring our awareness to our cheeks. And notice that when we inhale and our cheeks hug our teeth when we inhale, they release the teeth when we exhale. Now what I want you to do is I want you to adjust the upward going corners of your smile until you feel a symmetrical tension on the two sides of your face. Adjust the upward going corners of your cheeks and draw the breath through your cheeks like light through a lens that you can focus on the pineal gland, creating symmetrical tension on the two sides of the face. We'll aim the cheeks, the diaphragms of your cheeks. They will draw the breath through and aim that breath at the pineal gland, that force of pressure change. Now let's bring the awareness to the little nose flaps that hug the midline when you inhale and release the midline when you exhale. I want you to adjust the part of your smile that is below your nostrils. Create symmetrical tension in your face below your nostrils as you inhale. And you'll feel that the breath coming through the nose flaps gets aimed at the pineal gland, causing it to become increasingly distinct from the surrounding tissues, increasingly cool in temperature, and perhaps a little brighter with each new breath field. Make sure your suction seal is in place. Make sure that your tongue is hugging the contours of your mouth, especially in the back corners and across the posterior palate. And now on your next inhalation, I want you to bring your awareness to your eyelids. Your eyelids that hug your eyeballs as you inhale and release your eyeballs as you exhale, making your orbit get cooler. But now I want you to adjust the part of your smile that is just below and lateral to your eyes over your zygoma. And draw the breath right through the eyelids at the pineal gland. Your smile is like the handlebars of your cafe racer driving your breath into your pineal gland. Now let's bring the awareness to your eyeballs. I want you to feel for the borders of your eyeballs inside the eyeball socket. You can always go back and look at the first class where I show the pictures of the eyeball and the eyeball socket. Feel for the eyeball socket, and then feel for the space between the eyeball and the eyeball socket. Now what I want you to do as you inhale and exhale is I want you to know that the muscles that control your eyeballs are in the space between the eyeball and the eyeball socket. So I want you, and those are skeletal muscles. So I want you to create symmetrical tension in the space between the eyeball and the eyeball socket. And as you do this, that plane of cooling sensation that comes horizontally through the eyeballs will be drawn right into the pineal gland. Now let's bring our awareness to our eardrums. that want to hug the midline with inhalation, and they release the midline with exhalation. When we allow that little motion to happen in the eardrums, at the medial ends of our ear canals. You'll feel a little tidal current of air moving in and out of the ear holes, and we will also feel motion induced in the entire temporal region. In order to aim the eardrums at the pineal gland, we are going to adjust the lateral going corners of the smile. So you will make your smile a little broader. You will pull your smile a little more toward the outside. We adjusted the upward going corners. We adjusted underneath the nose. We adjusted underneath and lateral to the eyes. Now create symmetrical sensations in the lateral going corners of the smile, and you will feel a little traction that actually comes off the corners of your mouth over towards your ear, your eustachian tube. It will actually pull on your eustachian tube, changing the angles of your eardrums so that the breath coming through them gets aimed at the pineal gland. What you may actually notice when you do this is that it feels like it kind of opens up, creates a little decreased pressure at the base of the skull on both sides. So take a few breaths, adjusting the lateral going corners of your smile, making them symmetrical. Aiming the breath at the pineal gland, stimulating it. Causing it to become cooler in temperature and perhaps a little brighter in your awareness. You may even see inside your own skull a little flicker of light there. And now on your next breath, we're going to adjust this part of your smile. Did you know there were so many parts of your smile, that so many muscles of your face can participate in your smile? Allow the temples to be drawn in by inhalation. Let them puff back out with exhalation. Allow the part of your smile that is to the sides and above your eyes, lateral to and above the level of the eyes. Allow that the part of your body on each side to have symmetrical tension as you inhale. And you will feel the breath that comes through your temples get focused on, aimed at your pineal gland. Allowing it to become more distinct from the surrounding tissue, a little cooler in temperature, and perhaps brighter still. And now, I also want you to notice that when you aim your temples at the pineal gland, you bring your awareness to the front of your brain where it contacts the inside of your cranium, you may actually be able to feel that as you inhale, the front of your cranium steps back. It kind of gets drawn toward the back of your head. As you inhale, it's just probably a millimeter of motion inside your cranium, but you'll feel your brain get pulled out from the front of the cranium, which for most people in the modern world, their brain is jammed into the front of their cranium. And that pressure on the front of the brain actually inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is what we need for creativity, problem solving, connection, love. And when you create this little space between the front of the brain and the cranium, the front of the cortex, prefrontal cortex and the cranium, it actually allows the cerebrospinal fluid to come over the front of the brain like a little waterfall, making everything in there cooler still. Your smile is a smile is an anatomical consequence, or let me put it this way, a smile can be an anatomical consequence of a good and coherent breath. So we've now stacked multiple breath fields on the pineal gland. So now let's do some arm and leg breathing. And on your next inhale, I want you to spread the fingers in the palms. You're still engaging all the muscles of facial expression. Creating symmetrical sensations as you allow them to be recruited by your thoracic diaphragm. Now we're going to spread the fingers in the palms. We're going to gently engage all the muscles of the upper extremities, including the latissimus, pulling the scapula gently down the back so you have a balanced tension between the front and the back of the shoulder. This should augment your experience of pressure change in the center of the head. Now what I want you to do, and I'm going to show this with my hands, but if you're doing this meditation, you just continue to lay on your back and you can watch this later. What I want you to do as you inhale is you're going to slightly increase the tension in the right hand over the left hand as you inhale. And you're going to feel how that draws you just a little bit to the right. And you can do the same to the left. I want you to do this though with your arms. I'm showing you my hands on the screen, but you should just have them either straight out to the sides or palm up at your sides. But what I want you to do on your next one is we're going to, as we start to inhale, we'll have more tension in the right, and then we'll just kind of gradually glide it over to the left. And you're going to see that as you change the tension in the same breath, it's going to draw you around. Almost like you're flying inside your own skin. And now I want you to adjust the tension in your arms, make them very symmetrical, and see if you can draw the breath right up through your arms and draw it right into your pineal gland. We are gently creating pressure change. We're not having any air hunger. We're not forcing ourselves to hold our breath till we're miserable and uncomfortable and ready to pass out. We're just softly allowing the breath to fully mature through the tissues. Drawing all of the pressure up into the pineal gland. Now we can do the same thing with our legs. We're going to engage, we're going to flex, dorsiflex the toes and the ankles, pushing the balls of the feet down, squeezing at the same time, squeezing all the muscles of the lower extremities up to and including your butt cheeks as you inhale. Gently stacking multiple breath fields, vectors aimed at the pineal gland. Causing the pineal gland to become increasingly stimulated, increasingly distinct from the surrounding tissues. And you may even feel a little bit of light in the middle of your head. Piezoelectric crystals are like an antenna, that electromagnetic field. People say that the stimulation of these crystals or the compression and release of these crystals gives us the capacity to connect with other beings outside of ourselves. And I've heard the example used that when there is a herd of elk or deer or whatever, and one of them sees the predator, they don't have to tell everybody. The antenna inside their head communicates that to all of those around them, and they all flee at once. That's a particular kind of stimulation. The kind of stimulation we're doing right now is gentle. It's rhythmic, it's coherent. Connecting you to all beings in all times and spaces for the benefit of all. Let's just take a few more breaths like this. And now I want you to start to wiggle your fingers and your toes. You don't have to stop stimulating your pineal gland. Well, I would love it, honestly, if you get up off the floor and you go off into your life, stimulating your pineal gland continuously, forever and ever, amen. But let's start wiggling those fingers and toes. If you can, continue to allow the diaphragms in your body to have a resonance with the pineal gland as you wiggle your fingers and your toes. Let's start to move small muscles first, larger muscles next. Notice that as you inhale and exhale, if you still do that arm and leg breathing, you can still, whatever position you find yourself in, you can keep a connection with your pineal gland, but no pressure. This can get more natural as you go. So when you're ready, you can roll over, ideally onto your right side in a spiraling fashion, and come to a seated position. Gently open your eyes, and then we'll just do this little self-massage deal to finish things off. So, me. Rub your hands together. And cup them over your eyes. And pulse. Ears. Nose and mouth. Nose and mouth at the same time. Nose, mouth, and cheek at the same time. And then let's just do a little self-massage. Give your adrenal glands a little rub. They're just below your diaphragm. You can augment your digestive motion. I like to slap the bottoms of my feet. It's also not a bad idea to just acknowledge the pelvic floor. Okay. So that's pineal gland stimulation. Next week, we're going to talk about how to circulate cerebrospinal fluid to augment. So actually, I want to say a couple things about this with regard to sleep. I think you'll find this really helps you sleep. And if you're anxious, this is a great way to bring down anxiety. Breathing into the pineal gland and being able to actually, like this, this is not, if you are if you're allowing these diaphragms to move, if you're creating symmetrical tensions in the way I've described, you are actually generating very precise pressure on the pineal gland. If you practice this and then you want to do something really effortful and forceful, like the Joe Dispenza work, I think you'll find it far more effective. And I think you'll probably find that you have a much stronger container to host the kinds of energies that are generated from that work, or you might not feel like you have to, you know, because you have a more integrated structure to begin with. What else did I want to say about this? But it's kind of amazing the extent to which we can get very specific where we want to guide this. And something I left out, but perhaps you'll add it in your next meditation. Just remember, on every inhale, we're creating increased pressure on the pineal gland. And every time we deeply relax, we are generating a vortex there. So we're creating not just increased pressure, but we're creating alternating pressure increase and vortex generation. It's very good for your health, and very good for your sleep, as is circulating the cerebrospinal fluid through the central canal and the ventricles, which is what we will talk about. We'll talk about how to do that next week. And that is, also, if people are interested in the Joe Dispenza stuff, also you can take, I'm just giving you a far more technically precise way to generate those pressure changes. And I think a way that is a lot less, a lot more, I don't know, whatever. Thank you very much if you've watched all of this video stuff. I hope it isn't too long. And if you have any questions about it, please don't hesitate to reach out. Anything you ask me will only help me go further deeper in my understanding, and anything and any discoveries you have will build. Okay. Peace and love to all of you. Bye-bye.